Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. We have a genuinely massive, incredibly layered mission ahead of us today.
We really do.
If you are someone who has ever walked into a health food store or even just scrolled through a wellness blog and felt completely paralyzed by the sheer volume of information out there.
Oh, the endless rows of tinctures.
Yes, the tinctures, the competing claims, the confusing Latin names, you are definitely not alone.
It can feel like you need a medical degree just to pick out a tea for a sore throat.
Exactly. Our entire goal today is to cut through all of that noise. We are taking a comprehensive compendium of natural health, specifically the Neal's Remedies Guide to Medicinal Herbs.
Right.
And we are going to extract the most fascinating, most practical nuggets of knowledge. We want this conversation to act as your ultimate shortcut.
A cheat sheet, essentially.
Yeah. By the time we are done, you are going to be incredibly well informed about the history, the biological science, and the everyday applications of these plants.
Completely bypassing that dreaded feeling of information overload.
We are skipping the dense academic jargon and going straight for the usable insights. And to really set the stage for you, to understand the scale of what we are dealing with, there is a statistic from this source material that forced me to completely reevaluate my perspective.
It's a big one.
According to the World Health Organization, herbal remedies are not some niche alternative fringe practice. They are actually the most widespread system of medicine used on the entire planet.
When you pause and really let the weight of that statistic sink in, it completely flips the narrative we are so used to in the modern industrialized world.
Right, because we tend to view synthesized pharmaceuticals as the default and plants as the alternative.
But globally, and certainly historically, the plants are the default. And that realization perfectly establishes the analytical framework we're going to utilize for our discussion today.
Tell us about the philosophy they use in the book.
Well, the Neal's Yarrow text anchors itself with a very famous philosophy from Hippocrates, the ancient Greek physician widely considered the father of modern medicine. He famously instructed his students to let food be thy medicine.
Let food be thy medicine.
Yeah. What we see playing out in these sources is a profound secondary layer of healthcare that runs parallel to modern medicine. Let's be unequivocally clear here. Modern conventional medicine is an absolute triumph.
Of course. If you have a ruptured appendix, you need a hospital, not a cup of tea.
Exactly. But what this guide reveals is how everyday plants, things growing in window boxes, along hedgerows, or sitting in your spice rack, can be deployed to treat everyday ailments at their absolute inception.
We are talking about the very first tickle of a cold.
Right. A minor scrape from the garden, early signs of digestive distress. The underlying thesis of the text is that by addressing these minor foundational issues early and effectively with natural remedies, we can often intercept the trajectory of the illness,
You potentially prevent the development of a much more serious condition.
which in turn might help you avoid relying on heavy conventional drugs and the side effects that inevitably accompany them.
That distinction is so important. It is not about replacing your doctor. It is about equipping yourself for the everyday bumps and bruises of life before they require a doctor.
Precisely.
But before we get into the actual foliage, we need to talk about trust. The internet is full of unverified health claims, so understanding who wrote the book we are analyzing today is crucial.
The credentials behind this Neal's Yarrow Remedies Guide are formidable.
Right, this isn't a collection of rural folklore passed down through a game of telephone.
Not at all. It is a structured guide assembled by a highly experienced team with decades of actual clinical practice.
The contributors include practicing homeopaths, leading agricultural sustainability experts, and clinicians who are deeply trained in both Western herbal medicine and traditional Chinese medicine.
So we are getting a genuinely global, holistic, and scientifically grounded perspective.
Now, here's how we are going to navigate this for you. If we just read an encyclopedic A to Z list of herbs, your eyes would glaze over in 10 minutes.
Nobody interacts with their health alphabetically.
Exactly. When you wake up with a headache, you don't think, oh, I need a plant that starts with the letter F. You think, I need something to stop my head from pounding.
So we are organizing this deep dive thematically.
We have structured the material into distinct toolkits. We will explore the battlefield healers for natural first aid, dive into the gynecological toolkit for women's health, unpack the power of bitter herbs for digestion,
Explore how to supercharge the nervous system.
build up the respiratory arsenal for immunity, and finally, look at how to physically clear the system and get the circulation moving.
Structuring it by the body's systems and immediate needs is infinitely more practical. It bridges the gap between botanical theory and the actual lived experience of the listener.
Yeah.
You categorize the plant by the problem it solves.
Okay, let's start solving some problems then. Our very first thematic toolkit is one I find completely fascinating: the battlefield healers and natural first aid.
A great place to start.
And to kick things off, we are looking at a plant that I'm willing to bet a significant portion of our listeners currently have sitting on a sunny kitchen windowsill: aloe vera.
Very common houseplant.
Now, I always just thought of aloe as the gooey stuff you buy in a plastic bottle when you fall asleep at the beach. But the history outlined in the source is incredibly dramatic.
It really is.
This plant originally hails from tropical Africa, and historically, it was literally utilized as an antidote for poison arrow wounds. That is an enormous leap from treating a mild sunburn.
It is a phenomenal origin story, and it forces us to look closer at what a poison arrow wound actually entails.
What do you mean?
Well, in a historical tropical environment, if you are struck by a projectile, the immediate trauma is only the first part of the problem. The secondary, and often fatal issue, is the massive, fast-moving infection that follows. When we analyze the specific chemical properties of aloe vera, its reputation as a profound, life-saving wound healer makes perfect biological sense.
Let's get into the chemistry of it.
The fleshy, spiked leaves of the plant contain a highly viscous, cooling gel. The scientific data highlighted in the source shows that this gel is not just physically soothing, it's actively chemically antibacterial.
Antibacterial to what exactly?
Specifically, it demonstrates strong antibacterial activity against Staphylococcus aureus and several species of Streptococcus.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm grasping the real-world implication of that. Staph and strep, those are the exact types of opportunistic bacteria that live on our skin and in the environment, right?
Yes.
The ones that turn a simple scrape into a red, swollen, potentially systemic infection?
Precisely. In an era long before the discovery of penicillin or synthesized antibiotics, a staph infection in a deep puncture wound was often a death sentence.
Because the bacteria would just take over.
The bacteria would rapidly multiply in the warm, damaged tissue. So when ancient warriors or healers were splitting open an aloe leaf and packing that thick gel deep into an arrow wound, they were not just cooling the inflamed tissue.
What were they doing?
They were physically packing the wound with a localized, highly effective antibacterial barrier that actively inhibited the replication of those specific deadly microbes. It was biological warfare against infection.
That completely changes how I view the little potted plant in my house.
It should.
It is essentially a living biological first aid ointment dispenser. You don't have to go to the pharmacy. You literally just snap off one of those spiky gray-green leaves, split it down the middle, and you have instant access to a sterile antibacterial treatment for a kitchen burn, a fungal infection, or a patch of severe dry skin.
It's incredibly convenient.
But as we go through this guide, I'm noticing that the authors are very careful about safety, and there is a massive red flag in the text regarding aloe that we absolutely have to pass on to the listener.
Yes, and this is a foundational lesson in herbal medicine. Different parts of the exact same plant can induce vastly different chemical reactions in the human body.
Walk us through the distinction for aloe.
The source makes a very strict distinction. The inner translucent gel is what we use topically on the skin for its soothing antibacterial properties. However, if you take the whole leaf...
The whole leaf, meaning the green part, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which includes that tough outer green skin and the yellowish sap located just beneath it. If you consume that internally, it acts as a tremendously powerful purgative.
A purgative meaning a very aggressive laxative.
An incredibly aggressive one. The outer leaf contains a group of chemical compounds called anthraquinone glycoside.
Anthraquinone glycosides. Okay.
When these compounds enter the human digestive tract, they heavily stimulate the bowels, forcing strong, involuntary muscle contractions.
That sounds intense.
Historically, whole leaf aloe preparations were used to force the system to evacuate in cases of severe constipation. Because this stimulating effect is so systemic and so powerful, the text issues a very firm medical caution.
Yes. Yeah.
Aloe vera, in any internal capacity, should absolutely be avoided during pregnancy. The risk is that those strong, chemically induced muscle contractions could potentially trigger uterine contractions.
Wow. It highlights why we can never assume that just because a plant is safe to rub on our skin, it is safe to put in our mouths.
It demands a level of respect for the chemistry.
Okay, let's leave the tropical heat of Africa and pivot over to the damp, cool climates of Europe and Western Asia for our next battlefield healer.
Let's do it.
We are talking about yarrow, Botanical name, Achillea millefolium. Now, before we get to the blood and guts of the battlefield, the source dropped a historical trivia fact about yarrow that I found incredibly surprising.
The brewing connection.
Yes. Apparently, long before hops became the absolute standard for brewing beer, yarrow was heavily utilized in Germany and the Nordic countries as the primary bittering agent for brewing ales.
It's true.
I am trying to imagine what a yarrow beer would even taste like.
It would certainly have a very different, deeply herbaceous and fiercely bitter flavor profile compared to the floral or citrus notes we expect from modern hops.
Makes sense.
The fact that it was used in brewing tells us a lot about its chemical makeup. It is packed with complex volatile oils and bitter compounds that act as natural preservatives, which is why it kept the beer from spoiling.
But how does a beer ingredient end up in a first aid kit?
When we shift our focus to its medicinal application in our first aid toolkit, yarrow's most vital characteristic is its powerful astringent nature.
Okay, let's unpack that term for the listener. Astringent is a word we see on skincare bottles a lot, usually toners. But what does it actually mean in a physiological battlefield context?
An astringent is any chemical substance that physically causes the contraction or the shrinking and tightening of body tissues and mucous membranes.
So it pulls things together.
Right. If you apply an astringent to living tissue, it pulls the cells closer together. Historically, soldiers and field medics would gather the feathery, finely divided leaves of the yarrow plant, mash them up into a raw paste or poultice,
And just put it on the wound.
and pack them directly into severe, open sword or shrapnel wounds. Because yarrow is so highly astringent, the moment that plant matter made contact with the damaged bleeding tissue, it would chemically force the severed blood vessels to aggressively constrict.
It just clamps them shut.
This immediate tightening slows the hemorrhage, which in turn encourages blood clots to develop much more rapidly. It was an emergency brake for severe bleeding.
An emergency brake for bleeding. That is such a vivid way to describe it. And while hopefully none of our listeners are dealing with broadsword wounds anytime soon, the text provides a highly memorable, incredibly practical, modern application for this exact same chemical mechanism.
The nosebleed trick.
Yes. If you, or maybe one of your kids, suddenly gets a spontaneous nosebleed, the guide suggests a remarkably simple trick.
Very simple.
You just take a single, freshly picked yarrow leaf, roll it up slightly, and insert it directly into the bleeding nostril.
And the localized application of those astringent compounds will immediately constrict the capillaries in the nasal cavity and rapidly stop the bleeding.
It is the ultimate natural life hack.
It is elegant in its simplicity, and it relies on the exact same chemical principles as the medieval battlefield poultice, just scaled down for everyday life.
Incredible.
Now, to fully round out this concept of tissue repair, we must look at another plant that shares a very similar historical resume.
Agrimony.
Agrimony. Okay. The botanical name is Agrimonia eupatoria. If you walk through damp hedgerows or field margins in the summer, you might spot its tall, distinctive spikes of bright yellow flowers. Like yarrow, it has been revered for centuries as a premier wound-healing herb.
If it is in the same category as yarrow, am I right to assume we are dealing with another powerful astringent?
You are, but the chemical vehicle is slightly different. Agrimony derives its powerful astringent properties from its exceptionally high tannin content.
Tannins. Okay, I know that word from drinking red wine. It's what makes your mouth feel dry, right?
That physical sensation is the perfect way to understand how the plant works. Tannins are complex, naturally occurring chemical substances derived from phenolic acids.
Got it.
If you have ever forgotten a tea bag in your mug and accidentally drank a cup of black tea that was steeped for 30 minutes, you know that intense puckering sensation.
Oh, absolutely.
Your mouth instantly goes bone dry, and your tongue feels almost fuzzy and tight. That is the physical manifestation of tannins aggressively binding to the proteins and mucous membranes in your mouth, causing them to cross-link and contract.
So how does that apply to a wound?
When you take an infusion of agrimony and apply it externally as a skin wash or a lotion, those same tannins go to work binding the tissues of cuts, grazes, weeping eczema, or open skin sores.
Creating a tightened protective layer.
Yes, that seals out infection and promotes healing.
It literally puckers the wound closed. That makes total sense. But what I found so compelling in the Neal's Yard Guide is that because agrimony is considered a very gentle, very safe herb overall, you can take those external tissue tightening properties and apply them internally.
For digestion.
Right. The text highlights agrimony as an ideal remedy for digestive distress, specifically for children suffering from diarrhea.
It is a brilliant application of the pharmacology. Think about what diarrhea actually is.
It's an inflammatory response.
Exactly. It's an inflammatory response where the tissues of the gastrointestinal tract are irritated, overactive, and secreting too much fluid. By administering a mild infusion of agrimony tea, you are sending those tannins down into the gut.
And they do the same puckering action?
They come into contact with the inflamed intestinal lining and exert that exact same puckering, tightening effect. It reduces the inflammation, limits the excess fluid secretions, and physically tones the lax tissues of the digestive tract.
Naturally halting the diarrhea without relying on heavy synthetic antidiarrheal medications that can paralyze the gut.
Precisely.
And there is a detail in the text regarding this that I just have to mention because it blew my mind. The guide notes that if an infant is suffering from digestive looseness or diarrhea, agrimony is safe enough that a nursing mother can actually drink the infusion herself.
It's fascinating.
The active chemical constituents, those gentle tannins, will literally pass through her breast milk to safely and naturally dose her baby.
It really works.
The fact that a mother can process the plant chemistry and deliver the exact diluted medicinal dosage through her milk to soothe her child's stomach, it shows an unbelievable evolutionary synergy between humans and the plant kingdom.
It highlights a deep systemic compatibility. We did not evolve in a vacuum. We evolved alongside these complex chemical factories,
Right.
which provides a very natural bridge into our second thematic toolkit, a section where this systemic compatibility is on full display.
Yeah.
The gynecological toolkit and women's health.
This section of the guide is fascinating. Let's start with a plant called lady's mantle, or Alchemilla xanthochlora.
A very traditional herb.
First of all, the visual identification of this plant is so poetic. The source describes these beautifully lobed, almost pleated leaves that collect drops of morning dew.
They're very distinctive.
Historically, herbalists looked at the shape of these leaves and thought they perfectly resembled the draping folds of a traditional woman's cape or shawl, a mantle. And that physical resemblance to an item of women's clothing perfectly mirrored its centuries-old reputation as a primary, foundational remedy for women's reproductive health.
What you were describing is a classic example of the doctrine of signatures.
The doctrine of signatures, what is that?
This was an ancient philosophical framework, incredibly prevalent before modern science, where people believed that a creator had marked every plant with a physical clue.
A signature.
Right. A signature that indicated what it should be used for medicinally. A walnut looks like a human brain, so it must be good for the head. The red sap of a plant must be good for the blood.
So in the case of lady's mantle, the protective shawl-like appearance signaled its use in protecting and regulating the female reproductive system.
Exactly. It was, and still is, heavily utilized to treat menstrual irregularities, ease the pain and flow of excessively heavy periods, and historically, to assist in the recovery of tissues after childbirth.
But we don't just have to rely on the shape of the leaf anymore.
No, we don't have to rely on ancient philosophy anymore. When we look through the lens of modern phytochemistry, we can see exactly why this specific leaf is so effective.
What's in it?
The source points out that lady's mantle contains significant levels of salicylic acid.
Wait, salicylic acid, I feel like I know that name. Isn't that the primary active component that we synthesize to make aspirin?
It is the exact same core compound. Long before pharmaceutical companies were pressing white pills in a factory, plants like lady's mantle, and famously the bark of the willow tree, were naturally synthesizing salicylic acid.
So it's literally a natural painkiller.
When a woman consumes an infusion of lady's mantle, she is ingesting a potent natural anti-inflammatory and analgesic, a pain reliever. But the plant doesn't stop there.
What else does it do?
It also contains complex saponins, phytosterols, and just like the battlefield herbs we just discussed, it is a very strong astringent.
So it is delivering a multi-pronged attack on menstrual symptoms. The salicylic acid works to actively reduce the painful inflammation and cramping of the uterus, while the astringent properties simultaneously go to work, physically tightening the blood vessels to restrict the heavy blood flow.
That's the exact mechanism.
The text recommends taking it as a standard herbal infusion, basically a strong tea, up to 5 times a day during a difficult cycle to manage both the pain and the bleeding. It is a highly targeted botanical intervention.
It is a symphony of compounds working in concert. Now, if we look at another major player in this toolkit, we find a plant with a very different historical trajectory. Black cohosh.
Black cohosh. Okay.
Traditionally known as Actaea racemosa. The botanical description paints a picture of a striking clump-forming woodland plant. It can shoot up to 2 meters tall in the wild, topped with these fluffy, elongated white flower spikes that look almost like pale bottle brushes.
Where is it from?
Its medicinal origins are deeply rooted in North America, where it was a highly revered remedy among various Native American tribes. They utilized it for a wide spectrum of issues, including gynecological disorders, but also, quite remarkably, as a primary treatment for venomous snake bites.
I am trying to wrap my head around the jump from treating a rattlesnake bite in the American woodlands to modern gynecological care. How does a plant make that kind of therapeutic leap?
It is a testament to how clinical observation evolves over centuries. While the use for snake bites largely faded as modern antivenoms were developed, the observations regarding its profound effect on the female endocrine system only grew stronger.
So it moved into mainstream European medicine.
By the 19th century, European doctors had adopted it heavily, and today it is one of the most rigorously studied and widely prescribed herbal treatments in Europe for managing the symptoms of menopause.
The guide specifically highlights its efficacy in easing severe hot flushes, night sweats, and the often intense emotional and psychological upsets that accompany the menopausal transition.
The leading theory behind its effectiveness is that black cohosh contains complex compounds called isoflavones.
Isoflavones, what do they do?
These molecules are structurally similar enough to human estrogen that they can bind to estrogen receptors in the body, exerting a mild, balancing estrogenic effect that helps smooth out the drastic hormonal fluctuations of menopause.
Okay, this is the exact moment where we need to pause our enthusiasm and emphasize a very serious medical caveat laid out in the source text.
Yes, this is crucial.
As we guide you through this material, we have to present the full picture, and the text includes a strict, unmissable warning regarding black cohosh. The guide states explicitly that the use of black cohosh has been linked in medical literature to reported cases of liver damage.
The concern is significant enough that the sale of the herb is actually restricted or heavily regulated in several countries.
The text provides crystal clear parameters. If you choose to use it, you must never exceed the recommended dosage. It should be completely and totally avoided by anyone with a pre-existing history of liver disease or impaired liver function, and it must absolutely not be taken during pregnancy.
That caution is paramount, and it serves as a vital reminder of a core tenet we must always keep in mind. There is a dangerous misconception in modern wellness culture that natural nurmic automatically equates to harmless.
Right. Just because it's a plant doesn't mean it can't hurt you.
That is a fallacy. These plants are essentially highly sophisticated, potent chemical factories. They have evolved complex defenses and active compounds to survive in the wild. When we ingest them, we are introducing powerful pharmacological agents into our metabolic pathways.
They demand the exact same respect, dosage awareness, and consideration of our individual underlying health conditions as any pharmaceutical drug prescribed by a physician.
Extremely well said. Nature is powerful, and power requires respect.
All right, let's let the dust settle on that warning and transition into an area of health that affects literally every single person listening. Theme 3, digestion, detox, and the profound power of bitter herbs.
This is a great section.
And I have been waiting for this section because we get to talk about one of the most infamous mythologized plants in botanical history, wormwood.
Ah, yes. Artemisia absinthium. It is impossible to discuss wormwood without addressing the elephant in the room.
Exactly. The moment anyone hears the word wormwood, their brain immediately jumps to absinthe, the green fairy.
We picture 19th century Paris, the bohemian avant-garde.
Artists like Van Gogh and poets like Rimbaud losing their minds over this notoriously bitter, bright green, highly alcoholic, and supposedly hallucinogenic spirit. It has this incredibly dangerous, romanticized reputation.
It does.
But what I love about the Neal's Yard Guide is that it completely strips away all of that artistic mythology and forces us to look purely at the raw biological reality of the plant.
And the biological reality is arguably much more fascinating than the bohemian myths. Let's start with the name itself. It isn't metaphorical, it is entirely literal.
It's for worms.
Yes, it was called wormwood because for centuries across multiple cultures, it was recognized as a highly effective primary remedy for expelling parasitic worms from the human digestive tract.
How does it do that?
The plant produces a potent, volatile oil that contains a specific chemical constituent called zoochone. Zoochone is powerfully anthelmintic, which is the medical term for a substance that actively destroys or paralyzes intestinal parasites, allowing the body to flush them out.
So long before it was an artist's muse, it was a vital tool for survival in a world where food and water hygiene were, let's say, less than ideal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But beyond its ability to kill parasites, the defining characteristic of wormwood in modern herbalism is its intense, almost shocking bitterness.
It's a digestive bitter.
In the realm of digestion, bitter principles are not just flavors, they are biological triggers. When you consume a bitter herb, the moment those specific chemical compounds make contact with the bitter taste receptors on the back of your tongue, a neurological alarm bell goes off.
An alarm bell in your brain.
Your brain instantly sends signals down the vagus nerve directly to your entire gastrointestinal system. It triggers a massive reflex action.
What exactly is the system doing in response to that alarm bell?
It is aggressively prepping for digestion. The bitter taste causes your salivary glands to immediately flood your mouth with enzyme-rich saliva. It signals the stomach to drastically increase the production of hydrochloric stomach acid.
So it's turning on all the digestive juices.
And crucially, it acts as a cholagogue. This means it physically stimulates the liver and the gallbladder to contract and discharge a fresh surge of bile directly into the intestines.
And bile breaks down fat.
Bile is essential for breaking down dietary fats. So by merely tasting something incredibly bitter like wormwood, you are effectively jump-starting every single mechanical and chemical process in your digestive engine. It is the ultimate tonic for a sluggish, stagnant digestive system.
The idea that a flavor profile is actually a neurological switch is incredible. And the guide offers a specific, highly practical application for this mechanism that I think a lot of people are going to want to try.
The chocolate craving trick?
Yes. We all know that feeling around 3 p.m., that intense, sluggish afternoon crash where your brain is screaming for a chocolate bar or a massive hit of refined sugar.
We've all been there.
The text suggests that instead of giving in to the sugar, you take just one single solitary drop of the concentrated wormwood tincture and place it directly on your tongue.
Just one drop.
The sheer, overwhelming intensity of that bitter blast not only stimulates your digestive organs, but it acts as a complete neurological palate reset. It essentially shocks your sensory receptors so profoundly that the intense craving for sweet, heavy chocolate completely evaporates.
It is a visceral, immediate demonstration of how plant chemistry can override our behavioral impulses. Now, if wormwood represents the extreme aggressive end of the digestive toolkit, we need to look at another plant that operates much more gently.
And is already deeply embedded in our everyday culinary lives, even if we don't realize it. Chicory.
Sicorium intybus.
I guarantee a lot of listeners have encountered this without knowing its medicinal value. If you have ever been to New Orleans and had a coffee at Café du Monde, or if you've ever bought a caffeine-free coffee alternative at the grocery store, you have consumed chicory.
The roasted root has this deep, earthy, slightly bitter flavor that mimics the profile of dark roasted coffee beautifully.
It does, but the Neal's Yard source breaks down the science of why this isn't just a convenient flavor substitute for people avoiding caffeine. It is actually structurally, fundamentally beneficial for the architecture of your gut.
Let's talk about the inulin.
Right. The raw root of the chicory plant is incredibly rich in a starchy substance called inulin, and specifically complex carbohydrates known as oligosaccharides.
What makes oligosaccharides so medicinally valuable is how our bodies interact with them, or rather, how they don't. When you consume an infusion or decoction of chicory root, those specific carbohydrates are largely impervious to our stomach acid.
They just survive the stomach.
They pass right through the upper digestive tract, mostly undigested.
If we can't digest them, what is the point of consuming them?
Because we aren't consuming them for ourselves, we are consuming them for our microscopic passengers. Once those oligosaccharides reach the colon intact, they act as highly targeted prebiotics.
They feed the gut bacteria.
They become the primary food source that selectively feeds and promotes the rapid growth of bifidobacteria and other beneficial flora in the large intestine.
So you are literally fertilizing the good bacteria in your microbiome.
Exactly. In a modern world where our diets are often highly processed and courses of antibiotics can decimate our internal flora, drinking chicory isn't just a morning beverage choice. It is an active, daily maintenance routine to rebuild and sustain a robust, healthy gastrointestinal ecosystem.
It is digestive medicine working on a microscopic bacterial level.
It really is.
I love the idea of an invisible health benefit hiding in a morning routine. And the guide continues this theme of gentle foundational gut health by highlighting two herbs renowned for their incredibly soothing antispasmodic actions, caraway and purple giant hyssop.
Two very different traditions.
Now, caraway seeds, carum carvi, are famous for giving rye bread its distinct flavor. But the text points out that when prepared as a warm water infusion, the volatile oils in caraway are so remarkably gentle, yet so effective at relaxing the smooth muscles of the digestive tract and relieving trapped gas, that it is traditionally utilized as a highly diluted tea to treat infant colic.
It simply calms the painful spasms in a baby's developing gut.
And then we have purple giant hyssop, botanically known as Agastache rugosa. The source provides a fascinating cultural context here. It notes that this specific plant is one of two aromatic species recognized in traditional Chinese medicine under the name huaxiang.
What I find most compelling here is the sheer weight of the historical timeline presented in the text. Huaxiang has been continuously, rigorously documented and utilized in Chinese medical practice for at least 1,500 years.
1,500 years.
Its primary unvarying use over that millennium and a half has been to treat dampness in the digestive system, which translates to symptoms like severe abdominal bloating, poor appetite, and most notably, chronic nausea and vomiting.
Let that sink in. 1,500 years of unbroken, documented use for a stomachache.
It provides an incredible perspective. It proves that despite the invention of MRI machines and synthesized antacids, the pursuit of finding gentle, effective relief for digestive distress is a timeless, universal human endeavor.
Whether it is a mother brewing a weak caraway tea in a European farmhouse, or a highly trained practitioner prescribing huaxing in a modern clinic in Beijing,
humanity has consistently, successfully looked to these specific aromatic, volatile, oil-rich plants to soothe the fundamental distress of the gut.
it really emphasizes the shared human experience. Okay, let's take a journey upward. Let's move from the physical mechanics of the stomach up to the complex wiring of the brain. Theme 4 is focused entirely on supercharging the mind and the nervous system.
A very popular topic right now.
And we have to start this section with a plant that boasts what has to be the most delightful historical nickname in the entire guide: borage.
Borago officinalis.
Yes. The text mentions that the ancient Romans held this plant in such high regard for its psychological effects that they called it euphrosynum, which translates beautifully to the plant that cheers.
The plant that cheers.
I mean, if a nursery was selling the plant that cheers, they would be sold out immediately. Visually, it is stunning. It has these incredibly vibrant, bright blue, star-shaped flowers. But the guide doesn't just pass this off as ancient folklore.
It dives into the endocrinology.
It actually dives into the complex endocrinology to explain the biological mechanism behind exactly why this plant has the capacity to cheer people up.
This is where the intersection of traditional herbalism and modern hormonal science becomes deeply fascinating. Borage doesn't act on the brain directly. It acts on the endocrine system.
Okay.
Specifically, the chemical constituents in borage exert a direct, stimulating effect on the adrenal glands, which sit just above our kidneys. When you consume a medicinal preparation of borage, perhaps a strong tincture or infusion of the leaves and flowers, it gently encourages those glands to produce and release adrenaline.
Adrenaline. Now, adrenaline is our primary fight-or-flight hormone. In modern society, we generally associate adrenaline with chronic stress, anxiety, and panic.
Right.
Usually, we are trying to lower our adrenaline levels, not stimulate them. Why would we want more of the stress hormone?
Because context is everything. If someone is already in a state of high anxiety, borage is not the correct choice. However, if a person has been suffering from prolonged chronic stress, severe tension, or is recovering from a long, debilitating illness, their adrenal glands often become utterly depleted.
They just crash.
They enter a state of profound nervous exhaustion, lethargy, and deep physical depression. They simply have nothing left in the tank. In that specific depleted state, administering borage provides a gentle, medicinal nudge to the adrenal system.
Welcome start.
A small, controlled release of adrenaline acts as a powerful systemic restorative. It chemically lifts the body out of that crushing lethargy, making borage an incredibly effective, natural antidepressant and a potent combatant against the crushing fatigue of burnout.
It is literally chemically forcing the physiological systems to wake up, find their energy, and essentially cheer up.
That is such a nuanced approach to healing. It is not about suppressing a symptom. It's about rebooting a depleted system.
Now, the next plant in our nervous system toolkit is guaranteed to challenge how a huge portion of our listeners view a very mundane, everyday pantry staple. I am talking about oats.
Avena sativa.
Uh,
Yes, for the vast majority of people, their only interaction with this plant is in the form of a rolled, dried, threshed grain sitting in a bowl of hot water for breakfast.
Exactly. And while we all know that a bowl of oatmeal is fantastic for your heart health and managing cholesterol, the guide reveals that the true, profound medicinal power for the human nervous system lies in a completely different, often ignored stage of the plant's life cycle.
Herbalists do not wait for the oat plant to dry out and produce a hard grain.
The text details how the potent medicine is extracted from the green, newly harvested whole plant, a preparation known in herbalism as oat straw. You have to harvest it while the tall stems and the unripe milky seed heads are still vibrant green and bursting with sap.
The timing of the harvest is absolutely critical because the phytochemical profile of a plant shifts drastically as it matures. The dried grain has its own nutritional benefits, but that vibrant green oat straw is a completely different chemical entity.
What's in the green part?
It is absolutely packed with a specific matrix of saponins, complex alkaloids, and a massive array of bioavailable minerals, most notably high levels of calcium and silicic acid. In the traditional herbal pharmacopoeia, a potent extract of green oat straw is not considered a stimulant like borage.
What is it considered?
Instead, it is classified as one of the most profound, deeply nourishing, restorative nerve tonics available in nature.
How does a nerve tonic differ from a stimulant?
A stimulant forces the nervous system to expend energy. A tonic, like oat straw, physically rebuilds the infrastructure. It doesn't just mask fatigue, it deeply nourishes and repairs the frayed, damaged myelin sheaths and nerve fibers themselves.
It's actually structural.
It provides the literal raw, mineral building blocks the nervous system needs to reconstruct itself. Because of this deep structural rebuilding capacity, clinical herbalists utilize it extensively for patients who are suffering from shattered nerves.
People dealing with severe clinical depression, crippling anxiety, nervous tremors, and the profound physical debility that lingers after a long, intense illness.
It is the absolute definition of a nutritive restorative. It feeds the nervous system back to health.
It is amazing to realize that something so incredibly common, something we walk past in the grocery store aisle every week, possesses this hidden, supercharged identity if you just catch it at the right moment in its life cycle.
It's hidden in plain sight.
Speaking of supercharging the mind, the final herb in this specific section is gotu kola, botanical name Centella asiatica. The guide translates its traditional Sri Lankan name for us, which simply means conical leaf.
That's a direct physical description of its small, round, kidney-shaped leaves that creep along the damp ground in tropical regions.
But when we look at how it is utilized in the ancient, highly sophisticated Indian system of medicine known as Ayurveda, it goes by a much more revered, spiritually significant name, Brahmi.
And exploring its use as Brahmi raises a truly important conceptual question. It demands that we radically expand how we, in the West, conceptualize the very idea of herbal medicine. For the entirety of this deep dive so far, our focus has been entirely reactionary. We have been discussing physical healing in response to trauma or illness, how to stop a bleeding wound, how to soothe an inflamed stomach, how to clear a parasitic infection.
You have a problem, you take a plant to fix it.
Exactly. But in the Ayurvedic tradition, gotu kola is not primarily a medicine for the sick. It is primarily utilized as a profound brain tonic for the healthy.
So it is essentially an ancient natural nootropic.
Precisely. It is classified as an adaptogen, a substance that helps the entire mind and body adapt to and resist various forms of physiological and psychological stress. But its highly targeted, specific focus is on cognitive enhancement.
Making the brain work better.
The historical texts and modern applications assert that regular consumption of gotu kola actively improves memory retention, increases general intelligence and mental clarity, and promotes overall longevity of the brain's function.
It challenges the listener to completely reframe their relationship with the natural world. It asks us to think of plants not merely as a pharmacy to visit when we are broken, but as daily tools to elevate our cognitive baseline and optimize our potential when we are perfectly healthy.
Elevating the baseline, that is an incredibly powerful paradigm shift.
All right, as we move into Theme 5, we are shifting our focus from the brain down into the chest. We are looking at immunity, colds, and the respiratory arsenal. And we absolutely must start with the undisputed heavyweight champion of the kitchen pharmacy, Garlic.
Allium sativum.
Yeah.
It is, without a doubt, a titan in the global herbal world.
It really is. The source highlights that garlic boasts an incredible, unbroken, continuously documented medical history spanning at least 5,000 years across multiple continents. And when you look at the bulleted list of its biochemical actions provided in the text, it reads less like a plant and more like the massive, multi-page resume of a highly advanced pharmaceutical drug.
It is genuinely astonishing how many systems this single bulb can interact with. The text rapidly categorizes garlic with a barrage of medical classifications. It is a powerful antibiotic, a highly effective expectorant, a diaphoretic, a hypotensive, a potent antithrombotic, and a hypolipidemic.
Okay, let's slow down and translate that medical rapid fire into plain English for everyone listening. What does that resume actually mean for the human body?
Let's break it down piece by piece. As an antibiotic, it actively targets and destroys harmful bacteria and fungal infections.
Okay, antibiotic, got it.
As an expectorant, it thins out thick, stuck mucus deep in the lungs, making it much easier for you to cough it up and clear an infection.
That's the respiratory part.
Right. As a diaphoretic, it induces healthy sweating, which helps the body break a dangerous fever. Now, moving to the cardiovascular system, as a hypotensive, it actively relaxes the blood vessels to lower dangerously high blood pressure.
Lowering blood pressure, okay.
The term antithrombotic means it physically prevents blood platelets from sticking together. Think of your bloodstream like a busy highway. Garlic acts like a traffic cop, preventing the cars, the blood cells, from clumping together and causing a deadly traffic jam, which is a blood clot.
That's a great analogy. And the last one.
And finally, as a hypolipidemic, it significantly lowers total blood cholesterol levels, actively reducing the long-term risk of a major heart attack. And the vast majority of this sweeping systemic power is derived from a highly pungent volatile oil containing complex sulfur compounds, primarily a chemical called allicin.
It is basically a miracle bulb hiding in the produce section. The text mentions that people traditionally take the pressed juice or simply eat raw cloves daily to help prevent seasonal respiratory infections and manage those long-term cardiovascular issues.
Yes, very common.
But amidst all that heavy systemic science, there was one highly specific, incredibly relatable, localized tip in the guide that immediately stood out to me.
The acne trick.
If you are ever suffering from a sudden, angry skin breakout, the text suggests a brilliant life hack. You take a single, fresh, raw garlic clove, slice it clean in half to expose the inner juices, and before bed, you rub that cut, juicy side directly onto the acne pustules.
It is a perfect micro-application of the macro science we just discussed. Because garlic contains that powerful, broad-spectrum antibiotic allicin, you're essentially applying a highly concentrated, localized antibacterial strike directly to the source of the inflammation.
Targeting the zit.
It attacks the specific bacteria trapped in the pore that is causing the acne. You might go to sleep smelling like a very intense Italian kitchen, but it is a remarkably effective, entirely natural overnight spot treatment.
I love that. Now, if garlic is the heavy hitter we bring in to aggressively attack an active localized infection, the next plant the text introduces represents a completely different philosophy of immunity. It acts as a deep systemic shield. We're talking about astragalus, botanically known as Astragalus membranaceus, or sometimes referred to as milk vetch. Now, in this section, the text offers a really illuminating contrast between our Western approach to sickness and Eastern medical traditions. In the West, our immune strategy is generally highly reactionary. We wait until we feel the first scratchy signs of a cold, and then we immediately reach for the garlic or high doses of vitamin C or echinacea, trying to fight off the invader.
We wait until we're under attack.
But the guide introduces astragalus as one of the most fundamentally important major herbs in traditional Chinese medicine, where the goal isn't just to fight a current cold, but to build such deep foundational structural immunity that the cold never takes hold in the first place.
That difference in philosophy is profound. And the source details a fascinating cultural and medical distinction regarding exactly how and to whom this foundational immunity is prescribed.
Tell us about that.
In Chinese medical theory, astragalus is revered as a supreme energy and immune tonic. Its primary function is to strengthen the body's protective, vital energy, which is known as Wei Qi. It builds up a deep systemic resistance to recurrent viral infections.
But who takes it?
What is so interesting is that it is specifically tailored and prescribed as the primary tonic for younger people, those whose immune systems are still developing or who are burning the candle at both ends.
And older people.
Conversely, the incredibly famous, highly stimulating herb ginseng is generally restricted and reserved as the preferred vital tonic for much older individuals whose internal energy reserves have naturally diminished over decades.
That nuance is incredible to me. It is not a blunt, one-size-fits-all approach to health. The practitioner isn't just looking at the symptom and asking, what disease does this person have? They are looking at the entirety of the individual and asking, who is this patient? What is their inherent constitution? And what specific stage of the human life cycle are they currently navigating?
Exactly.
To round out our respiratory arsenal, we need to address the physical damage a cough can do. We have to talk about marshmallow. And yes, before any listeners ask, I am absolutely thinking of the fluffy, sugary, white campfire treat. But the guide very quickly pivots us away from making s'mores to the actual physical botanical plant Althea officinalis. The text notes that the botanical prefix Althea actually derives directly from the ancient Greek verb although, which literally translates to heal.
And the specific, highly effective healing mechanism of the marshmallow plant relies entirely on a physical concept we haven't encountered yet in this deep dive.
Mucilage.
Mucilage.
The thick, fleshy taproots and the soft leaves of the marshmallow plant contain exceptionally high levels of complex, water-soluble carbohydrates called polysaccharides. When these specific polysaccharides are extracted, they form mucilage.
Okay, let's unpack mucilage for the listener. What does that scientific term actually look and feel like in practice?
To extract it properly, herbalists use a process the text refers to as a cold maceration. You don't boil it, you simply chop up the dried, woody root of the marshmallow plant and let it soak in cold water for several hours.
Soaking in cold water. As it soaks, those complex polysaccharides swell up and leach into the water, transforming the clear liquid into a remarkably thick, highly viscous, almost slippery gel-like substance. When a patient drinks this thick, mucilaginous liquid, it acts as a powerful, physical demulcent.
A demulcent meaning something that coats and protects.
Exactly. It creates a soothing, highly protective physical barrier over raw, inflamed mucous membranes. Consider someone suffering from severe chronic acid reflux, where their esophageal lining is actively burning from stomach acid.
Or a bad cough.
Or imagine a patient with a dry, hacking, deeply irritated bronchitis cough, where the lungs feel like sandpaper. When they drink that thick marshmallow root soak, the viscous gel physically coats those raw, irritated tissues all the way down.
Coating the throat and esophagus.
It immediately shields the nerve endings from further irritation, profoundly soothing the inflammation and mechanically suppressing the urge to constantly cough. It is crucial to understand that this is primarily a mechanical healing action, not a chemical one. It works by altering the physical environment of the tissue.
Just the detailed description of that slippery coating makes my own throat feel better. It is incredibly logical.
Okay, let's transition from the lungs to theme 6. We are looking at clearing the system, and this toolkit focuses heavily on the often overlooked plumbing of the body, urinary and joint health.
The plumbing.
Yes. Our first plant in this section has a very literal, honestly kind of adorable name, bearberry.
Arctostaphylos uva ursi.
Yes, and the text breaks down that Latin terminology for us. Uva ursi translates directly and simply to great bear. The reason for the name is wonderfully straightforward. Wild bears absolutely love to gorge themselves on the small, bright red berries this low-lying plant produces across northern moorlands and alpine regions.
They do?
But while the bears are entirely focused on eating the sweet fruit, human herbalists completely ignore the berries and are much more interested in harvesting the plant's small, thick, leathery green leaves.
And they focus on those leaves because they are chemical powerhouses. Bearberry leaves contain significant concentrations of specific, highly potent phytochemicals called hydroquinones.
Hydroquinones. The most notable and medically important of these compounds is the chemical called arbutin. Now, what makes bearberry so utterly fascinating to study is its incredibly sophisticated, highly targeted internal delivery system.
Walk us through that journey. What happens when someone drinks bearberry tea?
When you consume a strong, warm infusion of bearberry leaves, that arbutin compound is absorbed through your digestive tract and enters your general bloodstream. But here is the brilliant part. While it is circulating through your blood, the arbutin remains largely inactive.
It's dormant.
It is essentially a dormant passenger. It doesn't exert any profound chemical effect on your heart, your lungs, or your brain. However, once that blood is filtered through your kidneys and the arbutin is extracted and excreted into the urinary tract to become urine, the unique, slightly alkaline chemical environment of the urinary system flips a chemical switch.
What happens when the switch flips?
The previously dormant arbutin is suddenly hydrolyzed It is converted into a highly active compound called free hydroquinone.
And what does free hydroquinone do?
It acts as an incredibly powerful, direct, physical disinfectant. It is essentially a localized natural bleach that sterilizes the fluids it touches.
A natural bleach.
So as that converted urine physically passes down from the kidneys through the ureters into the bladder and out through the urethra, it literally sterilizes the entire urinary tract from the inside out.
That is amazing.
Because of this brilliant delayed reaction targeted chemical mechanism, bearberry is regarded by clinical herbalists as one of the absolute most effective remedies available on Earth for treating acute cystitis, painful urethritis, and that terrible burning pain associated with severe urinary tract infections.
It is exactly like a laser-guided natural antibiotic. It waits until it reaches the exact site of the infection before it detonates. That is absolutely brilliant biology.
Nature is incredibly smart.
Now, the text pairs this precision tool with two other major broad-spectrum systemic cleansers, burdock and wild celery. Let's tackle burdock first, Arctium lapa. The source paints a very distinct, almost aggressive visual picture of this plant.
Oh, it's a big plant.
It is a massive, highly vigorous biennial weed. It produces these giant, sprawling oval leaves that can easily grow up to 30 centimeters across, creating a huge canopy. And in the autumn, it produces these famous, incredibly sticky, prickly round burrs that grab onto the fur of passing animals, or more likely, grab onto your jeans when you brush past them on a hike.
It is absolutely a plant that physically demands to be noticed in the landscape, and its internal actions are just as robust. In the terminology of traditional herbal medicine, burdock is classified as the quintessential alternative. In older texts, you will often see this referred to as a blood purifier.
The phrase blood purifier always sounds a bit medieval to me. How does a plant actually purify the blood?
It is a great question, because the plant isn't acting like a physical filter itself. The text emphasizes that burdock works by aggressively stimulating the body's own systemic filtration organs.
The liver and kidneys.
The heavy, deep taproot of the burdock plant contains compounds that highly stimulate both the liver and the kidneys. It forces them into high gear, dramatically increasing their efficiency at clearing out accumulated metabolic waste products, environmental toxins, and it is even clinically noted for aiding the body in chelating and ridding itself of heavy metals.
Okay, so it upgrades the body's internal plumbing. But the guide makes a fascinating connection here. It notes that because burdock cleanses the internal system so thoroughly from the inside out, it is traditionally utilized not for internal pain, but to treat persistent, highly eruptive exterior skin disorders.
Exactly. In holistic medicine, the skin is viewed as the body's largest organ of elimination. When the primary filters, the liver and kidneys, are overwhelmed, sluggish, or congested with toxins, the body tries to vent that toxic heat and waste through the skin,
which causes the breakouts.
This manifests as severe chronic conditions. Persistent crops of painful boils, weeping sores, and dry, scaly, intractable eczema. By taking a strong decoction of burdock root, you take the pressure off the skin by forcing the liver and kidneys to do their jobs properly.
Bleeding from the inside out.
It literally clears the internal toxic heat from the bloodstream, which ultimately allows the external skin to finally clear and heal.
It is treating the root cause of the skin issue rather than just slathering a cream on the symptom. And then we have our final cleanser, wild celery, Apium gravulans. Now, we obviously all know the pale, watery, cultivated celery stalks we buy at the grocery store for dipping in hummus. But the source makes it unequivocally clear that true medicinal wild celery is a much leafier, darker, and significantly more potent botanical version.
Very different from the grocery store version.
And for medicinal purposes, the focus is entirely shifted away from the stalks and placed squarely on the tiny seeds.
Correct. And the text issues a quick, practical caution here. You should never attempt to use standard cultivated grocery store celery seeds for medicinal preparations, as they are routinely treated with heavy agricultural fungicides.
Good to know.
You must source organic or wild forage seeds. These tiny seeds possess a very specific, incredibly powerful diuretic action. They contain volatile oils that specifically target the kidneys and encourage them to aggressively filter and eliminate uric acid from the bloodstream.
Uric acid. We hear that term a lot in relation to joint pain. Why is clearing uric acid so critical for someone's mobility?
Uric acid is a normal byproduct of the metabolic breakdown of certain foods. However, when the body produces far too much uric acid, or more commonly, when the kidneys fail to clear it efficiently, the concentration in the blood rises to a critical level.
And then what happens?
When that happens, the uric acid begins to physically crystallize. Imagine thousands of microscopic, razor-sharp shards of glass. These needle-like crystals settle and deposit themselves deep into the joint cavities, most famously in the big toe, but also in the knees and wrists. This causes conditions like gout and severe inflammatory rheumatoid arthritis. The pain of these microscopic shards grinding in the joint is notoriously excruciating.
So how do the seeds help?
By consistently taking a strong, concentrated decoction of wild celery seeds, you are actively forcing the kidneys to increase the flushing and elimination of that specific acid through the urine. You are offering profound long-term relief from the massive swelling and agonizing pain of gout by physically removing the microscopic crystalline debris that is causing the inflammation in the first place.
It is incredibly targeted physical relief. You're literally washing the glass shards out of the joints. Okay, we have reached our final section, Theme 7, warming up and circulation. And we are starting the circulatory toolkit with a plant of truly towering, imposing proportions, Angelica.
Angelica, Archangelica.
That name alone has so much grandeur. The source notes that this plant is a giant of the herb garden. It can easily grow up to 2.5 meters tall, with thick, hollow stems and these massive, striking, spherical green-white flower heads that look like exploding fireworks.
That's beautiful.
The text dives into the etymology and explains that its medieval Latin name, Herba Angelica, actually stemmed from the deeply held, pervasive European belief that this statuesque, towering plant possessed the divine power to protect the faithful against evil spirits, the plague, and witchcraft.
It is a beautiful, evocative piece of medieval folklore. But what makes herbalism so rewarding is when we can take that ancient superstitious concept of fighting evil and directly translate it into modern, observable physiological terms to see exactly why the plant was so revered.
So what's the science behind fighting evil?
When we look at the chemistry, the massive taproot of the Angelica plant contains a highly potent complex of volatile oils and dense warming resins. In the body, it acts as a profound, aggressive warming stimulant.
So how does one actually use it to fight the physical evil in their body?
You prepare it as a heavy decoction, which involves taking that tough, fibrous root and simmering it vigorously in water for an extended period to forcefully extract those dense resins. When a patient drinks that dark liquid, it literally drives a deep, pervasive heat into the core of the human system.
Warming from the inside.
The text specifically highlights its crucial use for treating severe chronic poor circulation and the cold, stiff, deeply entrenched rheumatic problems that often plague the elderly. As we age, our vital force can diminish, and we can lack necessary internal body heat.
Angelica brings the heat.
Angelica essentially acts like a match thrown into a furnace. It revs up the internal metabolic fire, dilates the blood vessels, and actively banishes the physical evil of cold, stiffness, and circulatory stagnation from the deep tissues.
I absolutely love how the ancient folklore perfectly aligns with the demonstrable physiological action. From the slow, deep, warming root of Angelica, we must transition to a plant that brings intense, immediate, fiery heat to the system, cayenne or the chili pepper.
A very familiar heat.
The guide traces its fascinating historical journey, noting that it was originally discovered, from a European perspective, in tropical Central and South America by Christopher Columbus during his voyages in 1493. And what is staggering is that within just a few short decades of that discovery, it had rapidly spread across the entire globe via Portuguese and Spanish trade routes to become an absolutely foundational culinary and medicinal staple in India, across Africa, and deep into Europe.
Its incredibly rapid global adoption is a massive testament to its undeniable potency. The world immediately recognized its power. Medicinally, the entire force of cayenne lies in a singular, highly concentrated compound called capsaicin.
Capsaicin, the spicy part.
When utilized internally, it acts as an extreme, rapid circulatory stimulant. If you have a patient suffering from chronic freezing cold hands and feet due to poor peripheral circulation, the text suggests taking a minuscule amount of the fiery tincture in warm water.
And that forces the blood to the hands and feet.
That capsaicin will instantly trigger the massive dilation of the blood vessels, physically forcing warm, oxygenated blood to rush out to the frozen extremities. But while that internal use is impressive, what is truly profoundly fascinating about capsaicin is the highly paradoxical way it is utilized topically on the exterior skin.
This part of the text genuinely confused me at first. The guide describes a process of making a concentrated, macerated herbal oil out of fiery cayenne powder and actively applying it to the skin.
Applying it over painful joints.
Now, I cook a lot. Anyone who has ever accidentally rubbed their eye after chopping a fresh jalapeno or a habanero knows that capsaicin burns with the fire of 1,000 suns. Why on earth would a medical professional ever instruct a patient to rub a violently burning spice oil directly onto a joint that is already in excruciating pain?
It seems entirely counterintuitive, doesn't it? It sounds like you were just adding torture to pain. But this is where the genius of neurology comes into play. Capsaicin acts as what clinical herbalists and neurologists call a counter-irritant.
A counter-irritant?
When you apply a capsaicin cream to the skin over a painful joint, it immediately causes a localized, intense heating, stinging, and burning sensation on the surface.
Yeah.
But this intense sensory input actually serves to completely overwhelm the local pain nerves.
Overwhelming the nerves.
More specifically, and this is the biochemical magic, continuous exposure to capsaicin rapidly depletes the nerve endings of a specific neurotransmitter called substance P.
What is substance P responsible for?
Substance P is the primary chemical messenger responsible for constantly transmitting deep pain signals from the damaged tissue up the spinal cord and into the brain. If you deplete the substance P, the brain simply stops receiving the pain signal.
The pain signal just stops.
The pain essentially ceases to exist to the patient. By intentionally causing a superficial, hot, distracting irritation on the surface of the skin, you actually block and profoundly relieve severe, deep, intractable nerve pain.
What conditions would you use this for?
The text specifically highlights this paradoxical technique for providing relief from the excruciating, lingering electric nerve pain caused by conditions like shingles, or the deep, aching agony of severe osteoarthritis. You are literally using the superficial fire of the pepper to burn out the deep pain signals.
That is such an incredibly clever biological hack. You are weaponizing the body's own nervous system against the pain. Our final herb in this circulatory toolkit and the final herb of our deep dive today is hawthorn. The botanical name is Crataegus laevigata.
Hawthorn.
The source describes this visually as a very common, deeply spiky, deciduous shrub that is often used across Europe for agricultural field boundaries and thick hedgerows. But while farmers use it to keep sheep in a field, medicinally, the delicate flowering tops and the dark red berries are universally revered as one of the most profoundly important foundational cardiovascular tonics in the entire global herbal pharmacopoeia.
It is the ultimate heart herb. Hawthorn contains incredibly complex bioflavonoids and potent oligomeric procyanidins. Its primary, rigorously documented action in the human body is as a profound peripheral vasodilator.
Meaning it relaxes the blood vessels.
It literally relaxes the smooth muscles surrounding the blood vessels, physically widening them. But crucially, it specifically targets and widens the coronary arteries, the vital vessels that supply fresh, oxygenated blood to the physical heart muscle itself.
Bringing more blood to the heart.
By widening these arteries, it dramatically improves the blood supply to the heart, actively reduces the overall workload and resistance the heart has to pump against, and acts as a profound, long-term, restorative tonic for the entire systemic cardiovascular network.
But, and this is a very big but, the Neal's Yard Guide uses this incredibly powerful heart herb to issue a very strict, highly prominent final caution.
We have to mention this.
It states unequivocally that attempting to treat actual diagnosed heart disorders is incredibly serious business and requires strict, professional, allopathic medical supervision. The text makes it absolutely clear. You should never attempt to self-medicate with hawthorn if you have a pre-existing heart condition.
Or especially if you are already taking synthesized prescribed heart medication, because hawthorn is potent enough that it will actively interact with and potentially amplify those pharmaceutical drugs. And that warning is the absolute perfect note to round out our entire deep dive today. It serves as a stark, vital reminder of the immense, very real power these plants hold. They are not merely gentle placebos. They are not just nice-smelling teas.
They are medicines.
They are highly active, deeply complex biochemical pharmacological agents. They possess the power to heal, to alter our physiology, and they demand deep knowledge, respect, and fundamental common sense from anyone who uses them.
So, after all of this, what does this massive journey mean for you, the listener? We have covered a truly tremendous amount of biological, historical, and practical ground today. My sincere hope is that your perspective on the natural world has been permanently, radically expanded.
I hope so too.
I hope that after listening to this, you never look at the annoying weeds growing in the cracks of your garden or the dusty spices sitting ignored in your kitchen cabinet in the exact same way again. They are not just background scenery or simple flavorings, they are the living, breathing, biochemical history of human medicine.
I echo that sentiment entirely. The overarching vital lesson we must take away from this comprehensive Neal's Yard Remedies text is that knowledge is only truly valuable when it is deeply understood and applied safely. I encourage everyone listening to begin viewing the natural world not as a passive backdrop to human life, but as a highly complex, incredibly sophisticated, deeply interactive pharmacy. When approached with respect, common sense, and proper informed guidance, these plants offer a remarkably powerful, deeply accessible way to nurture your foundational health and the resilience of your family.
Absolutely. The pharmacy is all around us. And I want to leave you with a final, lingering, somewhat provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. We have talked extensively about the ancient doctrine of signatures and thousands of years of human trial and error.
Yes, so much trial and error.
But just take a moment and really think about this. If disparate, disconnected human civilizations across the entire globe, from the Native Americans utilizing the complex enterogenic compounds of black cohosh in the deep woodlands, to the ancient Greeks meticulously documenting the mucilaginous properties of marshmallow root, to the highly advanced Ayurvedic practitioners in India, elevating gotu kola as a supreme neurological brain tonic.
We all found it.
If all of these diverse cultures independently, consistently unlock the incredibly precise, deeply complex chemical healing properties of these specific plants thousands of years before the invention of the modern microscope or the chemistry lab, what other profound, entirely untapped medical secrets are currently growing silently, just waiting to be understood, in the weeds of your own backyard? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.